بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of the Federation of Islamic Medical Association, I'd like to welcome you all to our fourth session today. A very exciting new topic with our fourth speaker, Bismillah. Personally, very excited. I'll hand over to Dr. Sharif to introduce the speaker and to shed some light on the things that we've covered so far in our webinars. Over to Dr. Sharif.
Jazakallah khair. Barakallah. Assalamu alaikum. I mean, it's great to have this webinars and online virtual meetings going on for the History of Islamic Medicine initiative. Now we have Professor Abdul Nasser Kaadan. He's very well known for his expertise in the history of Islamic medicine, mashallah. I'm just going to probably maybe mention very quickly, because I know him for almost over 23 years now. Professor Kaadan, he's a professor at the Weber State University in Ogden in Utah, in the state, United States. He's born, originally he's from Syria, and he's been graduated as an orthopedic surgeon and been practicing orthopedic surgery since 1986. And he had his PhD in the history of medicine from the High Institute for the History of Arabic Science at Aleppo University back into, I believe, 1993. And he was the chair of the Department of the History of Medicine at Aleppo University. And he was teaching the history of Islamic medicine since for a long time. Till 2017, he had to move to work as a professor in Weber State University in America. Also, it's interesting to know that Professor Abdul Nasser Kaadan, he was the founder, and he was the man, the dynamo man behind the foundation of the International Society for the History of Islamic Medicine. I remember when we met over 23 years ago in Qatar, in Doha, and now he's the honorary president of HIM, of this society, and also he's the chief editor of the journal. Professor Kaadan, he participated in quite a few, it's over 100, 130 international conferences. So he had a great authority in the history of Islamic medicine. He published over 75 papers, in fact, and 8 books on the same field. And he's been awarded many prizes. It's interestingly, he corrected many common errors in the field of history of medicine. And I'm going to leave the mic to him anyway, if you want to probably maybe start, maybe add any more introduction. And today we're going to discuss a quite interesting topic, Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina is the one of the great physicians on our Islamic medical history. I'll leave it to Dr. Abdul Nasser to start, please. I believe you don't have any slides to share, so you can please maybe feel free to.
No. First of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa afdal as-salatu wa atammu at-taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Actually, I would like to thank all the people who work in the field of HIMA for giving me the opportunity to actually present this presentation, which is about Avicenna. And I would like to thank you, my brother Sharif, for introducing me to this society. So let's go directly to talk about the subject of Avicenna or Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina, you know that it's in Arabic, Avicenna in Western languages. So Avicenna, of course, he is a great scholar, and because he is very important scholar in the field of medicine and in the field of philosophy. So many nations, there are a kind of competition among these nations to say that Ibn Sina belonged to our nations. But actually, the first nation who celebrate the anniversary of this man were Turkish people. Turkish people, since in 1937, they established a kind of ceremony to celebrate this man, and they celebrated him, as I told you. Then after that, Arab people and Iranian people, they followed them when they actually established, or they founded, a kind of visitable. The first one, it was in Baghdad in 1952, actually, and the other one then in Tehran in 1954. Because, as I told you, because all of these nations, they proud of this man. And not only of that, UNESCO actually it began to get the initiation, and then they celebrated this man when they called all the member. And you know that UNESCO is concerned in the issue of science and education, because from its name, UNESCO, it means United Nations for Education, Science and Culture Organization. So this UNESCO in 1978, they called all of the members of this organization to celebrate the anniversary of this man. And actually, this kind of celebration took place in Tehran again in 1980, when a lot of scholars from all over the world, they attended this kind of celebration. So this is, I just talk about Avicenna because he is very famous man. So a lot of nations, they want to celebrate anniversary of this man, including the UNESCO itself. And it was not for UNESCO to celebrate this man. They launched a prize by the name of Ibn Sina, and it began in 2003. Nowadays, it's called Avicenna Prize, which is mostly about scientific ethics or some aspect about this subject. And as I told you, it began in 2003 by UNESCO itself. And this gives us an idea about to how much extent this is very, very important guy. And no doubt that Ibn Sina, originally he is from Persia, but his language, it was Arabic. Of course, his mother tongue, it was Persian. But after that, he wrote the vast majority of his book, or we can say all of his book and letters, it was written in Arabic, except maybe 2 or 3 small letters, it was written in Persian, his mother tongue Persian language. And of course, Ibn Sina culture, it was Islamic one. He memorized the Quran when he was 10 years old, and he got all of the sciences related to Islamic Sharia when he was actually, since he was young. And unfortunately, we have a problem with Ibn Sina, actually during his life and nowadays. I would like to devote a couple of minutes to talk about this subject, about the background religion of Ibn Sina. No doubt Ibn Sina is a Muslim guy, no doubt about that. But even so, we have a lot of scholars who actually who lived during the time of Ibn Sina or even after him, like for example Al-Imam Al-Ghazali. Actually, they talk about Ibn Sina, not all of the scholars, some of scholars, they talk about that, and they skeptic about the reality if he is Muslim or unbeliever or something like that, because when he wrote in philosophy, they feel that he has a kind of odd believing or something or opinion which make him to be outside of the Islam or something like that, and he was accused as he is Zindiq or Batini or something like that. As I told you, I would like to shed the light about this subject, not only because of Ibn Sina, because of a lot of scholars who are so proud to belong to our Islamic civilization, to belong to our what is called it Islamic golden age. If you want to talk about that, it means that all the scholars who belong to this civilization, we can put them outside of the Islam, because a lot of those people, they accused that they are actually unbeliever, they are mushrik, they are kafirs, they are something like that. For this reason, I would like to concentrate on two issues. Number one, when we talk about Islamic civilization, when we talk about Islamic golden age, we talk about all the people who contributed in this civilization, whatever they're believing, whatever their religion, original religion, because all of them, they actually work under the umbrella, what is called Islamic golden age, Islamic civilization, which we are extremely proud of it. And we are working hard nowadays to restore our role in to build the civilization nowadays. So regardless of the religion, and for example, I would like to give you an example. The chief of translator in Islamic civilization, who was Christian, Hunayn ibn Ishaq. Hunayn ibn Ishaq, without Hunayn, Islamic civilization couldn't reach to a level which reached it at that time, because you know that any civilization movement, it will begin by translation, to translate all the books, scientific books from, for example, it was Greek language or Syrian language into Arabic language, which Hunayn ibn Ishaq, he was appointed in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad as the chief translator of that. And he achieved a lot of achievement on this aspect. And all of us should be proud of this man, even he was Christian. And this issue, very important in our Islamic golden age, to say that it's the most character of this civilization is diversity. They accept all the people, whatever they believe, whatever their religion. This is to give us an idea about that, to how much extent there is a kind of tolerance of this civilization. So Hunayn ibn Ishaq, then, he was very important guy, he was Christian. We have a lot of Jewish people. Who of us not proud of Musa ibn Baymun? Musa is the Maimonides, who is very important physician. He was the private physician of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. He was Jewish, not only Jewish, he was a religious man. Hakam, very important Hakam. Nowadays, Jewish people worldwide, they're proud of this guy. But we should say that he worked under the umbrella of Islamic civilization. And we're proud of him because he worked under this umbrella, even he was Jewish man. And not only of that, nowadays, you know that all over the world, they adopted what we called it the Hippocratic Oath, except in what is called nowadays Israel. In Israel, they said it is Maimonides' oath. And all of their physicians, when they graduated, they underwent to swear this kind of Maimonides oath, because they believe that he is very important man. And we believe that he was very important man. He achieved a lot of things in the field of medicine. But he worked under the umbrella of what we call it Islamic civilization. So we don't differentiate between he is Muslim, he is Jewish. And regarding the Muslim scholars or Muslim actually scientists at that time, a lot of them, you know that during the 4th century of Al-Hijrah, even 2 centuries before and few centuries after that, in all during Islamic golden age, during this time, we have a lot of sects of Islam. You know, the Mu'tazilid, they actually were dominated, spreading, you know, the story of the Al-Ma'mun, and about when they talk about the creation of the Quran, and Al-Ma'mun tortured some scholars because they actually didn't believe in that. We cannot consider Al-Ma'mun, he is kafir at all. Even he adopted the Mu'tazili sect at that time. Al-Mamun, he has very important achievement. He support the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. He supported scholars at that time. So it means that we should not talk about this subject. Even some scholars during that time, they said that this scholar is so kafir, he is not unbeliever, he has an odd, for example, believing, such as Avicenna himself. The one who accused him, Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali himself, actually, in one time of his life, he was unbeliever, and he was skeptating about the God. And then he put the book of Al-Munqaz min al-Dalal. And then at the end of his life, he actually concluded his life. He was very good Muslim. He belonged to Sufism. And even so, we can find who is his name, of course, Al-Ghazali, Hujjat al-Islam. He was titled Hujjat al-Islam. But even so, we can find some people, unfortunately, some religious scholars, nowadays, they believe that Al-Ghazali is fasiq. He is not true Muslim because he believed in Al-Ash'ari sect. He belonged to this actually sect, to this school. And they want the people not to read Kitab al-Ihya. They never advised to read it by some. Unfortunately, we have some scholars in Islamic world nowadays, they talk about we should not be proud of Avicenna. We should not be proud of the most important two pillars in Islamic medicine, Avicenna and Al-Razi. Also, they skeptic about Al-Razi religion. And they say that he never believed in prophets. He believed in God, but not in prophets. So it means, unfortunately, we have a lot of Muslim scholars nowadays. They say this important thing, which is, I think that I never agree with that. They want us not to honor anniversary of Avicenna. We should not be proud of them. We should not consider them as belong to what we call it Islamic civilization because he is non-Muslim. Also Al-Razi, if you open the door for those people, all scholars during this time who work under the umbrella of Islamic civilization, which consider them that great scholars, great thinkers at that time, who are non-Muslim, and we should not celebrate them. Al-Farabi, for example, a lot of people nowadays, they consider him as non-Muslim. We should not celebrate him. Al-Khwarizmi, the father of Al-Jabra, you know that, because Al-Khwarizmi has a kind of some odd believing about something in Islam. Ibn al-Haytham, the father of optics. Also, we have some scholars nowadays, not only during the time of Ibn al-Haytham. Nowadays, we have a lot of scholars, they are skeptic about that, about the religion of Ibn al-Haytham, who is considered the father of optics. A lot of scholars, even, you know, that Abu Hanifa himself, the Imam al-Azam, the great Imam Abu Hanifa. So, you know that some scholars during his time, they said that he 2 times in his life committed kufr. And then because, you know, that he called the first one who called about what we called it, the al-madhhab al-istihsan, as a source of Sharia, which was denied by Shafi'i, for example, and denied by some scholars who actually lived during his time or after him. So so in this case, we can, for example, according to the saying of some people actually who criticized Al-Imam Abu Hanifa al-Nu'man, who is a great scholar, and you know that he was called Al-Imam al-Azam. This is very important thing to be mentioned. I think it is not good way to have some people, unfortunately nowadays, we have some Muslim religious scholars nowadays, they called and they talk about, again, Ibn Sina, he is non-Muslim. We should not celebrate his anniversary. We should not honor him. Otherwise, if we honor him, if we celebrate him, they said we are afraid that not to become a Muslim or something like that. Unfortunately. So this is not according to Avicenna himself. It is belong to Averroes. Averroes, a great philosopher, actually. Anyway, So this is just, I want to shed light on this important issue because we have different issues nowadays. Nowadays, not at that time, nowadays, they talk about in this way. So going back to Avicenna, of course, as I told you, Avicenna, when we talk about the pillars of Islamic medicine, of course, Avicenna is considered the second one after Al-Razi. Al-Razi is considered, and he was called the physician, the philosopher. He is more physician than to become a philosopher. Why? Ibn Sina, he was titled the philosopher, the physician. It means that in the field of philosophy, he was very important, and he was adopted by many scholars that the third, and he was called the third teacher after Aristotle, Farabi, the second teacher, and Avicenna, the third teacher in the field of philosophy. And of course, Avicenna, actually, he was, because he was very important philosopher, he got some of titles. Some of them called him Hujjatul Haq, some of them Al-Shaykh al-Ra'is. Of course, Al-Shaykh al-Ra'is because he became a minister of prime minister 2 times during his time, because he worked not only in the field of sciences, he worked in the field of policy, and he was appointed 2 times as a prime minister, and he put in jail 2 times during his time, like many other scholars, because you know that many people, many scholars actually around him, there is a kind of generosity or something like that, and he was accused many times by the governor, by some people to the governor, and they put it in jail many times. And the most important thing to mention that Avicenna, during his life, he lived in Persia only. He never came to Baghdad, unlike Al-Razi. Al-Razi was born, he's Persian originally, he was born in Al-Rai city, which is at that time, it was near to Tehran. Now Al-Rai city is inside Tehran. And then he went to Baghdad, and he got actually, and he became a doctor, very important and very famous doctors, and he was appointed as the chief of BIMA al-Adudi in Baghdad. Unlike Avicenna, he was born in Afshana city, near to Bukhara, in what is called nowadays Uzbekistan. So Uzbek people now celebrate, of course, by this guy because he was born there. And he lived mostly in Hamadan, in different part of Persia at that time, actually, but never according to the references. And never he, as I told you, for example, left to Baghdad, which was the capital of science at that time. He spent all of his life moving in different parts in Iran. And the most important information about the life of this guy is taken from his student, whose name is Al-Jawzajani. Al-Jawzajani was very close student of him. And he actually put a kind of biography of Avicenna, which was reached to us through the Ibn Abi Usaybi'a. In the book of Ayun al-Anba fi Tabaqat al-Atba, he talked about the life, different aspect of the life of Avicenna, which is taken originally from Al-Jawzajani himself. Of course, when we talk about the importance of Ibn Sina in the field of medicine, of course, Ibn Sina, he is extremely, extremely important in the 2 fields, of course, in the field of medicine and in the field of philosophy. And what is very important for us now to talk about the achievement of Ibn Sina in medicine. A lot of people, they believe that Ibn Sina, when we talk about Ibn Sina, we talk about the canon book. And the canon book is the only book which was written, which was left by Ibn Sina. This is not true. Actually, according to many references, especially the father Shuhata al-Qanawati, who died, of course, now, and who lived 50 years ago, for example, from Egypt, he actually said that Avicenna edited about 276 between books and small letters. And of course, we a lot of these books or letters, it was lost. But it was mentioned in many, many references of people who actually living within that time, who lived within the time of the Avicenna or after him. But what we have nowadays, it's about 68 works of Avicenna, which is widespread all over the world between Oriental, actually libraries like that in Istanbul, or in some Western countries such as of the Library of London, the Library of Escorial, or something like that. And they classified the books of Avicenna regarding the branch of science. They discovered that it's 43 of his works belong to medicine, 24 belong to philosophy, 26 it's natural sciences, 31 it's related to religion or something like that. Psychiatry or psychology, it's 23, mathematics 15, logic 22, in interpretation of the Quran 5 letters or books. So it means that he was a polymath, not only physician, not only philosopher, he was polymath, as such as a lot of scholars during this time. You know that the majority of scholars who lived under the umbrella of Islamic civilization, we can consider them as polymath scholars or encyclopedic scholars at that time. But when we talk about the most important works of Avicenna, of course, we can discover that the canon book is in the front. It is the most important book written. And as William Osler, by the way, he is very important historian of medicine. He is originally from Canada, but he left to America, and he was the first physicians who work in Johns Hopkins University here in America. And this guy, he was specialized in internal medicine. In addition to that, he worked in the field of history of medicine. And of course, he actually had a look on the book of the canon book, and he studied the medicine of Ibn Sina. And he has very important famous statement. He said that the canon book is considered the most important medical textbook ever written. He decided that he belonged to Western countries, of course. So when he witnessed this kind of statement about Avicenna, it means to how much extent the canon book is very important. And I would like, of course, now to shed light about the canon book. But before I would like to talk about the canon book, I would like to mention to the next very important book related to Avicenna medicine, which is Al-Urjuza fi al-Tibb. Avicenna, of course, during his time, the canon book is adopted as a very important reference to test anyone who wants to practice medicine, to be tested, to qualify him before he practicing medicine. And one of the most important references, it was adopted during this time, the canon book. Avicenna at that time, he recognized to how much extent the canon book was difficult. And nowadays it's difficult. I will talk about that because he write it in very strong Arabic language. And your Arabic should be very good one to understand the canon book. So Avicenna recognized that, and he was recognized that to how much extent it is difficult to medical student to memorize this book. Then he summarized all the canon book in a poetry form to make it more easy to medical students to memorize medical knowledge. And by memorizing this about 1,000 verses of this poetry, they can memorize nearly everything about medicine. He summarized the canon book in a poetry form, which is called Al-Urjuza fi al-Tibb, which we have it now, and it is edited. We have a lot of copies, which is edited under the title of Al-Urjuza fi al-Tibb of Ibn Sina. And fortunately, we can see that the opening actually verses of this poetry, Ibn Sina says at the beginning, يقول راجي ربه ابن سينا ولم يزل بالله مستعينا. So how we can believe him that he is non-Muslim? How we can categorize him as kafir or he's batini or something like that? So unfortunately, this is, we should avoid. We cannot, I will not surprised this kind of thing maybe in the past. For some scholars who were, because you know that generosity among scholars at that time, it was widespread. And I will not surprised for some scholars to say something about the Ibn Sina at that time. But unfortunately nowadays, to see some religious men, some very famous religious scholars, I don't want to mention to their name, would they claim that Avicenna should not celebrate him, should not consider him belong to Islam, something like that. And he says very clearly from his time until nowadays, until the hereafter, he said, يقول راجي ربه ابن سينا ولم يزل بالله مستعينا يا سائلي عن صحة الأجساد اسمع صحيح الطب بالإسناد. By the way, he is considered the first guy who talk about الطب المسند, evidence-based medicine. Nowadays, it is translated الطب المسند, which is, you know, that it's developed in the year of something like 1980. الطب المسند or evidence-based medicine. We can see that Ibn Sina, he talked about this issue at the beginning of his الجوزة. يا سائلي عن صحة الأجساد اسمع صحيح الطب بالإسناد. So the الجوزة في الطب, he summarized all the canon book in the form of about 1,000 verses of poetry, which enable the medical student to memorize it, and then to memorize the majority aspect, the majority titles of medicine at that time. Going back to the canon book extremely, if we have choices among the most important book, you know, that we have in our civilization, in Islamic Golden Age, we have maybe 4 very important encyclopedic books in medicine. The first one, the largest one, is Al-Hawi of Al-Razi. Then we have the canon book of Ibn Sina. Then we have Kamil Al-Sina'a Al-Tubbiyya. Then we have Fardus Al-Hikmah li Ali ibn Abbas Al-Majusi. So we have 4, what we call it, the most important encyclopedic book, which fortunately are available nowadays. All of this book edited nowadays. But what are the most important thing regarding Avicenna? Al-Qanun fi al-Tibb. Al-Qanun fi al-Tibb is extremely important because of the most important thing is the methodology which was followed by Ibn Sina in his book, which is very close to the methodology with our modern textbook of medicine followed. For example, he devoted an introduction in his book, The Canon, about what we mean by the disease, what we mean by medicine, what we mean by health, something like that. And then he devoted special chapter talking on anatomy of human being. Of course, when he talked about the anatomy, it was very, very important, because he summarized the anatomy of all the body as in special chapters in his book, The Canon, according to the anatomy which was well known at that time. So, and by his anatomy, you know that Ibn al-Nafis, we consider him as the discoverer of what we called it, the minor of pulmonary surgery. In which book of Ibn al-Nafis he discovered that? In a book which is called Sharh Tashrih al-Qanun. Ibn al-Nafis, he put a book very important. It's called Sharh Tashrih al-Qanun, the explanation of the anatomy which was put it by Ibn Sina. In this book, Ibn al-Nafis, he talked about the pulmonary circulation, and by this way he is considered, before William Harvey described that. But he depend on what? He depend on the anatomy of Ibn Sina. So it means that anatomy of Ibn Sina, it was very important, and it was the way, the introduction, the corridor of Ibn al-Nafis to actually talk about the pulmonary circulation through his book Sharh Tashrih al-Qanun. So the Qanun book, as I told you, it is extremely important for number one, because of the methodology it was followed. For example, I studied some chapters which is related to my original field, which is orthopedic and fractures. And I explain it, and I edited a book about bone fractures as viewed by Muslim physicians. As viewed, I devoted very big chapter and to talk about bone fractures as viewed by Avicenna. And I discovered that Avicenna, he followed a kind of methodology which is very closely to our modern textbook which follow. He talked about, when he talk about fractures, he talk about all fractures generally, what are the causes behind that, what we mean by fracture, what are the symptoms and signs of fracture, how we can diagnose it, how we can treat it, and what are the complications of that, and what are the prognoses, which is called at that time taqdimatul ma'rifah. Taqdimatul ma'rifah, it means the prognosis, which is means from Latin, it is taken from Latin language, pro, it's before, gnose, it means the ma'rifah. So it was translated by Muslim scholars at that time, the complication, the prognosis is taqdimatul ma'rifah. So he began to talk about, generally speaking, about fractures. Then he talked about every fracture individually, beginning by the skull until the foot, in a way which is extremely like the way which our modern textbook to be followed. I think if you go to the respiratory tract diseases, the same thing, we can find it. And this is what I say about the methodology of the book itself. Because of this methodology, it was very early to be translated into Latin language. Many times. The first time it was by Gerard of Cremona, Gerard al-Cremoni, who translated into Latin, and it was introduced to the West through the translation of the Canon book from Arabic into Latin language. And he was edited a lot of times in Latin language. And it was approved as the most important reference in medical knowledge, different medical knowledge, actually, especially, for example, in Paris, in Belgium, in Brussels, in actually Vienna, and a lot of, in Belgium, sorry, and a lot of libraries in Europe. They adopted it as the most important reference until 17th century. But according to UNESCO itself, the UNESCO, they published a journal, and I think that in a special issue which was published in 1980s, they claim that the Canon book, it was adopted in Belgium, in Brussels Library, until 19th century, not 17th century, 19th century as the most important actually reference of medical reference during this time. So it means that European people early, they recognize the Canon book through the translation of it into Latin language and also to Hebrew language. It was translated early into Hebrew language as well. So why is the first one and why it is most important than the Al-Hawi book? Al-Hawi book, of course, it's equal maybe 3 times or more than the size of the Canon book. But the problem of the Al-Hawi book, it was not edited during the time of Rhezius himself. The Rhezius, he died before editing his book. So the book, which was left by him as a scattered paper, not actually organized at all. And his students, Al-Razi students, after he died, they used to gather all of these papers, and the Hawi book, it was appeared to the people in disturbed way, which is edited nowadays. If you have a copy of it, by the way, it is edited. Maybe recently in Lebanon, we have a copy which was published maybe 15 years ago. It is much better than that one which was originally published in India at the beginning of 20th century. Now this is more recent century, which consists of 8 volumes of book. So Al-Hawi book, you can find it. If you read it, you can find this kind of disturbance. There is no kind of methodology, which is, we can find it in the canon book. The canon book is extremely well organized book. Very good methodology followed by Ibn Sina himself. And this is why it was widely adopted in Eastern part of the world and in the Western part of the world during this time. And some people, they ask very important question. Can we benefit nowadays, according to our practice, benefit from some theories which is mentioned in the canon book? I don't think that we can do that, because you know that at that time, the importance of the canon book, it was important during this time because it gathered all the information related to medicine since the time, prehistoric time, since the time of Greek philosopher, Greek physician like Hippocrates, like Galen, like some other scholars, like Indian scholars, for example, Persian medicine. He gathered all of this information of medicine until the time of Avicenna, and he added a lot of notes, which he actually added to his book from his own experience in medicine. So we cannot say that nowadays, and which is very important thing to recognize nowadays, who is the father of medicine? Hippocrates. Hippocrates, who lived something like 300 BC, more than 2,000 years ago. Avicenna, he lived about 1,000 years ago. But even so, all over the world, we consider Hippocrates as the father of medicine. Why? More than 99% of the medicine of Hippocrates is invalid. But even so, we consider him as a father of medicine. Because of many reasons, we have to take this issue in the context of their times. In the context of the time of the canon book, of the time of Avicenna, we consider him as a great physician. But nowadays, of course, because you know the theory of medicine at that time, the theory of diseases which depend on the humoral theory or something like that, which is now disappeared after we have a lot of development in the field of microbiology, in the field of pathology, in the other field in medicine, a lot of different things regarding medicine. But nowadays in Harvard, nowadays it is general believing that what they teach today, what they teach in Harvard University, which is the most important university worldwide, of course, no doubt about that. What they teach it, every generation, what we mean by generation, 25 years, every generation, 50% of this information which they teach us today, it will be invalid. It will be changed. We are talking about 50%, talking about 25 years. Now we are talking about 1,000 years of Avicenna medicine. We are talking about Hippocrates more than 2,000 years. So it means that no way, we cannot benefit from this kind of medicine. But we have to recognize, at that time, it was very, very important. Without this book, medicine which was not developed until nowadays, it's a kind of series of development. We have to recognize that. And this is why, for example, British people, they proud of William Harvey. Why a lot of people, for example, proud of discoverer or something and that thing, because they belong to their civilization and they're proud of their civilization. And the same thing regarding our scholars who belong to Islamic civilization. So the answer of this question, can we benefit of that? Actually, I don't think that it is beneficial nowadays. Unlike we can find some scholars nowadays, they believe that we can benefit of that. Personally, I don't agree with the opinion, but we have to consider this book because it is very important, is a kind important in the series of development of medicine from that time until nowadays. So this is very important question, and I think that I answered it. So going back again to the canon book, which is considered one of the most important books in Islamic civilization, actually Islamic golden age. If we talk about medicine, number one is the canon book, of course. Then we can talk about Al-Hawi book, which is, as I told you, which is not very well methodology, because Al-Razi himself, he died before he edited it, and then his student, they gathered all the papers related to Al-Hawi book. One of the most important thing which criticized the canon book. Some scholars during that time, the time of Avicenna, they criticized him, unlike that of Al-Hawi book. Al-Hawi book, the most important thing that it is very well documented book. For example, Al-Razi in his book, Al-Hawi, he said, Galen or Galinos in Arabic said so and so. And he talked about, he actually narrated, he actually quoted the saying of Galinos to Galen. Hippocrates said so and so. Abocrat said so and so. And so other Greek scholars, for example, or Indian scholars. This is the what followed by Al-Razi. And then when Al-Razi, he want to say something belonged to him, he said, Li. It means that this is from my experience. And then he says something about that. This is very important documentation regarding the Al-Hawi book. But Avicenna, he didn't do that because he wanted actually to make it as general textbook of medicine. Like nowadays, we can see that we studied in our university when we were a student at our university. We read some books which is written by our professors without mentioning to the sources every, for example, statement, which one, which reference taken, or something like that. It's a kind of sum of textbook which is followed. Avicenna, during his time, so he actually didn't want to every statement to be documented or something like that. So this is sometimes some people, they criticize this issue regarding the canon book because he never mentioned. So I think that maybe what is inside the book itself, we can say that again. I would like to stress that Ibn Sina, the canon book, we cannot nowadays trace something we can, for example, benefit from it according to our current practicing nowadays. But we have to mention two very important reality. I still remember that in 1996, an International Society for History of Medicine, which is the largest society related to medicine, not Islamic medicine, medicine generally. It is called International Society for History of Medicine. They used to hold every 2 years their international conference. Their international conference at that time, it was in Kos Island in Greece. They hold it in, actually, they held it in Kos Island because they believe that Kos is the headquarters of the place where Hippocrates, he was born, in Kos Island. And they want to revive his anniversary. I attended this conference. My paper, it was about bone fractures as viewed by Avicenna. And I provided to them saying of Avicenna, of what we call it nowadays, delayed splintage theory. Delayed splintage theory, this theory, it was put it in 80s of last century by very famous orthopedic surgeon from Britain. His name is George Perkins, Professor George Perkins. He is considered the pioneer of this theory, delayed splintage theory. It is summarize the issue in a way we have not immediately to rush to treat fractures, big fractures such as, for example, femur fracture, but we have to postpone it few days until to make a kind of improvement of the general condition of the patient and the swelling in the femur itself to be little bit actually less, and then we can rush to treat the fracture itself to splint it. This is called delayed splinting theory. And as I told you, according to Apley, which is considered the Bible of orthopedic in Britain, Apley's system of orthopedic and fractures. According to Apley, this book, he considered George Perkins is the pioneer of this theory. During the days of the conference, in my paper, it was very, very clear to everyone. I give them the text from the Canon book in Arabic and translated into English. And I told them that this is Avicenna. He talked about this theory 1,000 years before George Perkins. He talked about this theory very clearly. Should not rush very quickly to splint any fracture, especially the big fractures, until at least the swelling to be more and more less. After that, we can make a kind of splintage of this fracture. And I think I support that everyone was persuaded about that Avicenna should be considered as the pioneer of this theory, not George Perkins. But it was not enough of me to be persuaded about that. I told the chairman of the conference at that time, I think that his name is what, John something, John, I have his name now. John, something like that, yeah. I told him, as you are the president of this conference now, John Clue, I think, something like that. And what do you think that to send a message to the publisher of the book of Apley system of orthopedic and fracture to correct this information and to say Avicenna, he is the pioneer of delayed splintage, not George Perkins. John Clue, I'm sure about his name. His name is John Clue. I told him. He said, it's okay, please write this message and we can sign it. Actually, I wrote it to be sent to the publisher of this book. And it was signed by a lot of scholars who attended actually the conference, and they approved that Avicenna before George Perkins he was. And we sent it to the publisher. And what do you think that what they did? We waited the next edition of the book. The book is again Apley System of Orthopedic and Fractures, which is considered one of the most important books related to orthopedic surgery in Britain. We waited the next edition to be surprised that they canceled at all talking about delayed splinting theory. Never mentioned to George Perkins, never mentioned to Avicenna. So this is, I think that you can explain what happened, why they didn't mention to Avicenna. Anyway, so this is a lot of achievement achieved by Avicenna in, at least in my field, I recognize it. But I think that if you have different field, if you are specialized in, for example, pulmonary medicine, and you are specialized in respiratory diseases, in digestive disease, you can go back to read the chapter related to these diseases to discover that a lot of things mentioned by Avicenna, and nowadays it's adopted or it is attributed to Western mind. Another important thing I discovered actually, which is mentioned in the Canon book, which is what we call it Bennett fracture. Bennett fracture nowadays, it's a kind very well known for any orthopedic surgeon. It's a kind of fracture in the base of in the base of the big toe here in the hand, the big finger in the hand. So, and this is called Bennett fracture, which described also by British orthopedic surgeon about something like 200 years ago, or at the beginning of 20th centuries. But Avicenna, when he talked about the fracture of the hand, he talked about this kind of fracture. So we can recognize a lot of things actually, which is nowadays attributed Western mind, and the Western country, they proud of this scholar and that scholar, like George Perkins, like Bennett, like Brock method of fracture of the patella, for example, comminuted fracture of the patella, which is to be treated by removing the patella, which is now followed, and it's called the Brock method for treatment of comminuted fracture of the patella, which was firstly mentioned by Al-Razi in his book Al-Hawi. In Al-Hawi book, he mentioned the Brock method of treating the comminuted fracture of the patella. By the way, how we can recognize that this achievement by Ibn Sina? Because, you know, and not mentioned before him, because you know that Al-Razi, he lived about more than 100 years before Ibn Sina. And it means that Ibn Sina, of course, he had a look to Al-Hawi book. He studied Al-Hawi book. Because you know that when Ibn Sina, he was in Hamadan, he treated the prince of the city at that time. His name is Nuh ibn Mansur. And he wanted to gift him something. So he allowed Ibn Sina to get to his library. At that time, the library of Nuh ibn Mansur, it was extremely very important library. And Ibn Sina himself, he said that when I entered this library, I saw a lot of books which not seen by anyone before. And I found it's very good opportunity for me to get a lot of benefit from these books. I got a lot of benefit. One of these books, of course, it was Al-Hawi book. It means that Ibn Sina, he put a lot of information related to his book Al-Qanun. So when we see that something which is mentioned by Al-Razi, not mentioned by Al-Razi in Al-Hawi book and mentioned in Ibn Sina book, it means that Ibn Sina, he discovered it by himself. So that's very, very briefly, I'm talking about the importance, especially I concentrated on the importance of Avicenna in the field of medicine, the importance of Al-Qanun book, and what we can benefit from the Qanun book, and what is the most important thing related if we consider him is belong to Islam or non-Islam, which is, I think it's a shame nowadays to talk about something like that, because it is not only on Ibn Sina, it is all of our actually Muslim scholars during Islamic golden age. The majority of them, they accused at that time, and unfortunately we still have sometimes some religious men contemporary, they believe you should not celebrate the anniversary of so and so and to honor so and so. That's everything for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and you get some benefit of that. And I open the door of if we have some question for that.
Jazakallah
Yes,
khair.
please.
That's great. Barakallah feek, Dr. Abdul Nasser. Yes, great. Slightly bit disappointed because Hawi, Al-Qanun, Kamil Sina Al-Tibbiya, and Firdaus Al-Hikmah, 4 books. Where's my great friend Zahrawi's book, At-Tasrif Liman Ajiza An Al-Ta'lif? I thought that probably maybe should have some space.
Exactly.
I know he probably maybe concentrated on maybe pharmacy and a bit of medicine, and he left the 30 chapters for surgery. But I'm sure, I mean, they're all great. I mean, what I like when you mentioned Ibn Sina, when he put the evidence-based medicine, when he mentioned in his Urduza as a great, I mean, over 1,000 little verses, ألف بيت الشعر. يا سائلي عن صحة الأجساد اسمع صحيح الطب بالإسناد. So encourage the people to get the evidence and to read the evidence in his book Al-Qanun.
Brother Sharif, let me answer the first question about the Al-Zahrawi book. Of course, when we talk about encyclopedic book, it means encyclopedic book in medicine. It contains all aspects of medicine. These encyclopedic, we have these 4. While the book of Al-Zahrawi is more important in the field of surgery and pharmacy, of course. So even Al-Tasrif book, it contains all aspects of medicine, but he devoted to talk, for example, on surgery more than to talk about internal medicine in the field of respiratory disease, for example. not in a balanced way. He concentrated on surgery, and this is why I not consider it as belong to encyclopedic book in medicine. But of course, no way. Of course, Al-Zahrawi extremely important, especially in the field of surgery. He is considered the prince of surgeon during medieval ages.
The father of surgeon, you're right. One of the sister actually asked if there's any English translation of Al-Qanun, Akhi.
Oh, this is very important. Fortunately, few years ago, maybe 20 years ago, sisters from Iran, her name is Lali something, which is the owner of Ghazi. Please just remember Ghazi Publishing House, which is located in Chicago. This woman, who died 2 years ago, she published the canon book, complete set of the canon book, which is consist of 5 volumes. I recommend every physician here, not here in America, worldwide, to have a copy of this book, which is belong to Ghazi. You can Google it. You can go to Amazon and to Google the canon book in Amazon, you will find it. It's 5 volumes, complete set of translation of the canon book in English, which is translated by Lali something, her first name Lali. By the way,
is it
Lali,
available online, Akhi, as a PDF?
Available, no, it is not available as a digital, but in Arabic it is available in digital according to the most recent edition, which is Lebanese one. In Lebanon, it was belonged to 15 years ago.
Sure. I think we can have Dr. Salim wants to contribute. Please feel free. Raise his hand. I don't have the full name. Sorry. Dr. Salim, you need to unmute if you can. And Brother Muhammad, can you allow?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. Oh, Professor Salim Hassani.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
First of all, I'm really so delighted to see and hear Dr. Nasser, whom last I have met must have been about 12 years ago in Halab, in Aleppo. Great occasion. Thank you so much. I had to just interfere a little bit about the translation of the Al-Qanun fi al-Tibb. I have a copy of the translation, which was carried out in India by Al-Hamdad Foundation, which was led at the time by Hakim Sayyid, rahmatullahi alayhi. So it's not Lala as the first one, but it was done by this organization. It's a phenomenal work. Unfortunately, it's not online, and it seems that it has not been properly distributed and published, but it is available. I thought this information is important because the effort of that organization and the effort and the amount of obviously money and energy that's been put into translating the whole should not be overlooked and should not be oversighted, especially that Mr. or Dr. Hakim Sayyid was a pioneer of the history of medicine in India and then later on Pakistan. He has set up a whole foundation into this field. His daughter now has inherited the Hamdard Foundation, and they have a university also dedicated on the history of medicine. They also have a huge institute doing research using herbal and what they call Unani or whatever medicine. I have actually had the pleasure of visiting Pakistan a few years ago, and I went specially to meet her, to honor her, because I didn't have the pleasure of meeting Dr. Hakim Sayyid. before he had this accident in a motorcycle. Maybe some people say he was actually killed. I don't know, but I had the pleasure of meeting a great lady, and I'm sure that people can find her in the internet. And that was the little contribution I thought I should say. I'm not a historian of medicine, by the way, but I thought I shouldn't just
Barakallah.
opportunity to mention this.
Yes, I want to say something, Sharif. Thank you so much, Dr. Salim, for this, actually, what you said. And also, it's my pleasure to see you or to meet you now again. So actually, I met Hakim Saeed a lot of times. The first time it was in 1992 in Tehran, in a very big conference about history of medicine. And we talk about, of course, the honor of Hamdard. I visit Hamdard in Pakistan as well. So according to my knowledge, that the complete translation of the canon book, it is not completed in English, according to what he told me, Hakim Saeed. Personally, he told me about that. This is why I didn't mention that. But nowadays, when I was asked about the complete translation of the book, is it available now to buy it, something like that? So I mentioned Tulali, which is completed translation. Maybe not she is the only translator, but she completed publishing it, maybe gathered from different sources, maybe some of chapters taken from Hamdard. I'm not sure about that because I don't have actually the English copy, because I have the Arabic copy. So when I was asked about that, I not mentioned, but thank you so much, Dr. Salim, just to mention by that, to that. And by the way, it was my honor. Of course, Hakim Saeed is very, very important man in the field of history of Islamic medicine. He was the one who founded Hamdard Foundation, which is extremely important. Thanks a lot, Dr. Salim.
Jazakallah khair, akhi. When you mention, Dr. Abdul Nasser, the information revolution and the amount of data and information changed every 100 years, every 50 years, now every 10 years is really great. And some books, yeah, probably maybe you feel it's irrelevant. But again, when you mentioned this, I was just thinking myself, subhanallah, our noble Quran Al-Kareem, it's 1400 years old. We still, every day we benefit. We've been reading few days ago. We had like a little circle on Tadabbur Quran. Every time you read, this is the book which never
the miracle.
ends.
This is the miracle.
Exactly,
the miracle.
This is the miracle. Subhanallah. Barakallah fi. You mentioned quite nicely on the some criticism of Ibn Sina and the way Al-Razi he documented his book in a slightly different way. Ibn Sina, he put it. I mean, this is quite interesting, akhi. When I read Al-Tasrif, it is quite nice when you read Al-Zahrawi talking about Galen, Jalinos, and they said Jalinos used to do this. I feel that's not the right way. In a very nice, polite way, they mentioned. He was talking about I believe the rib fractures, and Jalinos, he suggested give the patient some food which create some gases in his tummy, so the gases will push the fractures, will reduce the fracture. Obviously, Al-Zahrawi, as a surgeon, he has a slightly different ways. He likes the surgical way. But what I'm trying to say here, the way they criticize, the way they put it in a very nice, polite way, in a very scientific way, and in fact, he adopted some of Galen's technique on closing the abdomen, for example, and he had his own way. So it's great to learn from these scholars, whether Zahrawi or Ibn Sina or Al-Razi, mashallah. The mind, the way this, the encyclopedic thoughts, the way they respect to the others, and the humble as well. They're not arrogant. They're not. Jazakallah khair. I don't know if there's any more questions, or if you want to add
I would
anything.
I would like to add for what you mentioned, which is very important. Al-Razi also, when he mentioned to Jalinus, he never said قال Jalinus. He said قال الفاضل Jalinus.
The noble Jalinus.
Exactly. So it means that this is to support what you mentioned related to Al-Zahrawi, of course.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khair. I can't see any questions or any. I think we can conclude here. Inshallah, the presentation will be recorded, already been recorded. Inshallah, will be uploaded in our channel. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. If you want to add anything, please feel free. Abdul Nasser, do you want to add anything? Do you want to conclude?
Thank you so much. Only to thank you. Only to thank you.
بارك الله. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم. We'll see you inshallah soon.